Hello, everyone. My name is Kate P. My name is Caitlin Poindexter. I go by KP, and I am the Good Food Purchasing Initiative Community Fund Program Manager with CIFPAC. This is the second annual round of the Metro Chicago Good Food Purchasing Initiative Community Fund, and we call it the GFPI Community Fund for short. If everyone can see my screen here, I have a little presentation for us to go through. Apologies if you can hear the leaf blower outside, but I'm going to do a brief version of the info session, just kind of go over the high level details of the grant. I'll show you where you can find the more granular details, and then the rest of the session will be a Q&A where you guys can ask any questions you may have. We can go over specific questions. If you, have gotten started on the application and want to review any parts of that, and we can just use the remainder of the time however you folks on the call would best benefit from using it. So with that, I will get let's see. Okay, there we go. All right. So GFPI envisions a food system where our community institutions support and contribute to building the collective power for those who have been structurally excluded from control over food production and access to imagine, build, and tend to a liberatory food shed. And GFPI mission, my screen is paused. Okay, there we go. You should be able to see the agenda now. Sorry about that, the technical difficulty there. Okay, so this was the overview I just talked about. We'll do the welcome, overview of the fund. I'll get into the eligibility requirements a little bit and application support, and then the remainder of the time we'll do the Q&A. And so the GFPI vision and mission, I think it's just really helpful to know what those are to kind of give context for the fund and kind of where it was born out of. And so what I was getting into there is GFPI envisions a food system where our community institutions support and contribute to building the collective power of those who have been structurally excluded from control over food production and access to imagine, build, and tend to a liberatory food shed. And the GFPI mission is to work to ensure that the places that feed our communities purchase and produce food that advances this good food system for all. And a good food system is a system that's accessible, it's equitable, it's racially just, it's healthy, it's fair, it's local, it's humane, and it's sustainable. And so these criteria tie directly to the 5 core values of the Good Food Purchasing Program. And this grant fund is oriented around these values. And so these values include nutrition, connecting community members with nutritious foods and our nutrition education. There's environmental sustainability, reducing the environmental impacts of food production and increasing sustainable practices all throughout the supply chain. There's valued workforce, promoting safe and fair treatment and compensation for food systems workers. That's things like living wages, benefits, disability accommodations, vacation time, paid leave, etc. There's local economies, strengthening the regional food economies to create thriving, good food businesses and living wage jobs. And there's animal welfare, ensuring the humane treatment of animals and reducing overall meat consumption. And so now the high level details of the grant overview. So the GFPI, the 2024 round of the GFPI Community Fund will be providing 10 to 15 awardees with grants that range from $40,000 to $80,000. On top of that, there will be tailored technical assistance that will be provided. And in order to relieve some of the most common constraints that are experienced by systemically marginalized farmers and food entrepreneurs when it comes to accessing funding, this grant is trying to achieve this goal by offering awardees flexible funding when it comes to how the grant funds are spent. And also there will be support during the application process, like things like this meeting. We know that farms and food businesses often have multiple projects and initiatives that are happening simultaneously. So applicants are free to submit applications for multiple projects but only one award will be given for each organization in a given grant cycle. And we can talk more about that if folks have questions about, how to decide between submitting one application or multiple if you do have multiple projects. We know that many grants have a burdensome reporting requirement. So in lieu of the extensive reporting, the awardees will instead have quarterly check-in sessions with me, the GFPI Community Fund Manager, and that'll happen after the initial onboarding once awardees are selected. And these quarterly check-ins are intended for the benefit of the awardee, as well as they're important for us to understand how the funds are being used and ensure that they relate back to the goals of your project and align with the goals of the grant as well. During these check-ins, awardees will have access to additional coaching and project support and opportunities for industry connections on a quarterly basis. There will also be exposure and networking opportunities. This is optional, but if you're interested, we will be connecting everyone with the other 2024 awardees for collaboration and resource sharing purposes to help build out this regional food shed. And you'll also be connected to previous awardees, so the 2023 awardees, for similar purposes. And we'll continue to build out this network of growers and food organizations that are interested in the same dream of a liberatory food shed in the Metro Chicago region. And finally, another benefit of this grant is that tailored technical assistance offering I mentioned. This is tailored to each recipient after onboarding. There's a section of the application where you can indicate what kind of TA, technical assistance, that you're looking to receive. And it's offered in addition to the financial award. And so regardless of the funding decision, if you submit an application, there is an option to opt in for SIFPAC to connect you with resources and folks within our network and propose connections for collaboration within our food ecosystem. So eligibility. When it comes to who is eligible for this funding, we are targeting farmers as well as food organizations and businesses. This is systemically marginalized local farmers who adhere and or strive towards those values that I outlined earlier: racially equitable, healthy, fair, local, humane, sustainable. And this includes both rural and urban growers, as well as indoor and outdoor growers. And when it comes to food organizations and businesses, this includes local processors, value add manufacturers, food service providers, prepared food providers, distributors and or aggregators that align with those values that we've been talking about and are in need of financial support and technical assistance for capacity building or to increase your access to community food access sites and institutional buyers. So for these farmers and food organizations, we're looking for folks to have a desire to supply and sell. So your organization or your farm will aim to begin, expand, and or improve your current service to community meal sites, public meal programs, and or institutions. And we can talk about what those are. That's things like your hospitals, schools, your senior centers, community gardens, food pantries. So we're looking for the farmers and food organizations, businesses have the desire to sell to those places. On top of that, we're also looking for your organization to have a desire to collaborate. So the long-term goal of the fund is to be less transactional and more focused on relationship and community building. So in that vein, we would like your farm organization to have plans and aspirations for developing collaborative relationships. And there's also a portion of the application that asks about your demonstrated dedication to collaborative relationships through resource sharing, knowledge sharing, things like that, with other mission-aligned farms and food businesses in the Metro Chicago food system to advance the GFPI values that I shared previously. Carrying on with the eligibility requirements, we're also looking for folks to serve Metro Chicago. So when we talk about Metro Chicago, for us, we're defining that as suburban Cook County and or the city of Chicago. And so we're looking for organizations to serve those areas. And then I have a link here so that you can see the different zip codes and municipalities that are in suburban Cook County for your reference. And I can paste that in the chat as well. If anyone's looking for that, it's also available on the website. And then, so you'll be serving Metro Chicago, but you'll be based within a 250-mile radius of Chicago. There's parts of Illinois that aren't inside this radius. So if you're based in Illinois and or within this 250-mile radius, you are in the eligible geographic area, and that radius extends to 500 miles for meat, poultry, and seafood. And then I've included a link here of that 250-mile radius for folks to be able to see if you fall within the eligible geographic area. But just a reminder that if you're in Illinois, you are eligible. That's been a question that folks have had. And then lastly, your organization will be a legal entity, which means you're either a sole proprietor, you're privately, cooperatively, or nonprofit owned and operated. And then the last point is that your organization or business is owned or controlled by folks who experience social, economic, and or political exclusion and or discrimination based on characteristics such as race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, disability, and or religion. And if you have any questions about your farm or organization's eligibility, you can ask that during the Q&A session. There will be one more office hour session. We also have one-on-one sessions I'll get into shortly. So there's many opportunities to ask about that, or you can drop your question in the chat as well. All right, so the timeline. The application opened on October 4th, and it'll be open for 5 weekends, and it'll close on November 11th. So we have a couple weeks left here. The closing time is right before midnight, and we have an evaluation team with diverse experiences, identities, and perspectives across the Metro Chicago area and beyond that will be aiding in the decision-making process, and then we'll release those final decisions before the end of the year. The duration of the grant itself, I think this was on the last slide, is 1 year. So it'll be going from December 2024 to December 2025, and your project should span, fit in with that within that 1 year period. All right, so application support. If applicants have additional questions or you need help with your application, you can join one of the group office hours like this one that we're in right now. There'll be one more next week on Tuesday. And in order to make this application process as accessible as possible, in addition to the office hours, there will also be 30-minute one-on-one sessions where applicants can ask questions or request specific help with their application. And so that's by appointment only, and you can schedule that at the link there, which is also available on our website. There's also language interpretation services that will be available upon request. So please reach out to me via email if you'd like to utilize the language interpretation services, and that goes for the office hours or the one-on-one sessions. And there's my email there at the bottom of this slide. Awesome. And so that's the high-level overview of the grant. And so there was a kickoff webinar that happened on October 3rd, where I went into much more detail about all of the pieces of the grant. I went over the different application materials and gave a review of, what's there and kind of walked through in detail all the different supplementary materials and the application itself. So if you're looking for a really good deep dive into the application itself, the application materials, all of that, that session was recorded and is available on our website for your reference. And I'll paste the website link in the chat. Mabel already did it. Beautiful. Thank you, Mabel. Awesome. So you can go to that link and it's under kickoff webinar section to find that deep dive. And then the rest of this call we'll spend doing an office hour session. So you guys can ask any questions off of the presentation I just gave. If you've come with any questions, you can ask those here. If you have specific questions about your application, about eligibility, anything like that, the rest of the time we can use however would be most helpful to you guys. So with that, I will let us start the Q&A session, and you're free to raise your hand, come off mute, or place your question in the chat. I think my screen is shared here. So May, you're definitely not the first one to ask about this. Folks are really interested in seeing last year's awardees. And so 2023 was the inaugural year of the grant fund, so the very first year. And almost the main pieces of the grant are very similar to last year's. Before sharing these, I will say these are not the only eligible projects. We've had folks propose projects, so many different kinds of projects, anywhere under the sun that kind of fits in what their organization business is doing. So your organization does not need to have one of these projects in order to be eligible or have a better chance of receiving the grant. These are just examples of eligible projects, but there's definitely more eligible projects than what I'm going to share here. Um, oh yes, it is available for being. Oh, awesome! Thank you, Mabel. Okay, so one of our awardees last year, Adelante Center, they're a nonprofit organization that serves in Lake County, um, and their mission is to create wealth in distressed communities through entrepreneurship, living wage job creation, and community development. Um, and they also provide nutritious prepared foods in places where there's food deserts and where fast food was a predominant diet. They used their funding for a reefer truck, I'm almost positive. And that was, they used that to carry out their mission of increasing access to folks across the city with the food that they were growing. And so they're also using that for collaboration purposes. I believe they have other organizations that they work with who have had issues with transportation as well. And so, not to get into too much of the weeds of how they kind of situated it into their project, but that was a big portion of their funding was used to get that transportation vehicle that kind of facilitated the rest of the goals of their project when it came to increasing access um, to the foods that they were providing. Chicago Urban Farm Solutions. I believe that they use their funding. So they're a 20-acre farm. They grow specialty crops, kale, collard greens, cabbage, cucumbers, tomatoes, and they have a mission to donate to mission-aligned organizations and underserved communities. They've recently came into a lot of land and are looking to increase their capacity. Um, and kind of utilize all of this land that they've come into. And so portions of their funding were used to just getting the infrastructure set up and allowing them to grow throughout more seasons. And so they use portion of the funding for hoop houses, seeds, and gas lines to help them get their winter operations set up, and other things as well. But that was kind of the predominant part of that. Um, who else? Food Hero is a social enterprise and culinary school. So they do catering, they have a grocery store, a food production business, and they sell medically tailored meals, meal kits, and groceries. And they cater to communities like churches, businesses, and also to individuals directly. And their mission is to train individuals from low income communities in the south and west sides of Chicago to build their culinary confidence by developing career paths in hospitality, starting a food business, or cooking for better health. And so that this cooking for better health piece was kind of what their project focused around. They had a 12-week pilot program where they did exactly this, connected folks with, learned about the different health conditions that they were experiencing and taught them kind of new ways that they could, engage in cooking and eating to help address their different health conditions. And so I think they're taking that to the next step and partnering with institutions like Rush Hospital to kind of expand what this looks like. But their project was centered around this 12-week pilot program and this cooking for better health piece. Who else? Phoenix Bean is an interesting one. So they're the oldest tofu manufacturer in the Midwest, and they make a lot of tofu and soy-based product um, at their facilities. And they use their funding to kind of create a little internal supply chain almost. So there's a byproduct of soy, tofu manufacturing and working with soy. It's this fibrous material called okara, and they took the fibrous material, which was just a byproduct they really were trying to find a use for, but didn't actively have one, and used their project to take this byproduct, send it to a livestock farm where the animals loved it, super nutritious and great for the animals there. And then the compost from that livestock farm was sent to the soy farmer that she got her soybeans from. And so it kind of created this closed loop system where, you know, all of this byproduct was kind of getting incorporated back into the soy that was and the tofu that she was making at her facility, and increasing, you know, the nutrients and all of the good things that compost can do um, for crops. What's another one? Windy City mushrooms. I think this is the last one I'll go through before pivoting and see if there's any other questions here. But Windy City mushrooms, with another of our awardees, they produce gourmet mushrooms for Chicagoland, and they also have a like individual product, a vegetarian product that's designed to expand mushroom consumption, and it's a pre-made product that they serve, and they're intentionally designed to mimic foods that children are comfortable with, and so they're also looking to get that into K through 12, and schools around the Metro Chicago area. And they use their project they already had a project in mind of increasing their capacity, and they're kind of serving and providing their peak capacity that they had, and their demand was out exceeding the supply that they had, and so their project was focused around increasing their infrastructure, their different grow rooms and things like that, so that they could serve more folks around the city. And so those are just a few projects. I'll say again, not the only eligible projects. Um, oh, wonderful. I didn't realize there's a grower in the room. But yeah, so these are just some of the projects focused around increasing capacity, focused on connecting folks with healthy, healthy and nutritious education. Um, I feel like the Phoenix Bean project was touching a lot on the environmental sustainability pieces, as well as, things with their capacity. So it's hitting a lot of different marks in these different projects, and hopefully that generated some ideas for you guys about what you might be able to do. And if anyone has specific questions about your specific organization's eligibility, or like a project that you may have in mind, we can definitely talk through that in a group setting.